Am I gonna get canceled if I admit why I almost DNF'd this book? I love this book so much. I love this book so much. So I don't know where that young adult is coming from. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 books I read in January. Yes, only 4. That's actually quite good for me. And you'll see why when we get into the statistics and comparing January 2025 to January 2024. But we're also going to talk about the last book I recently read because I finished reading that one February 1st. And yes, I know it doesn't count technically in my January reading wrap up, but I want to give it the space that it's due. I don't want to wait until the end of February to finally talk about it because I might forget just how much I loved it. It's been my only 5-star read so far. And so I want to hold space for that book. So we're going to talk about that towards the end. Yeah, let's get into it. Like I said, we're going to use my stats. I built it. I love it. I think it's great. And I like to see just like kind of how I'm comparing to the previous year, not because it's a competition, just because, you know, I think it's fun. So yeah, let's get into it. I read a total of 4 books. It says did not finish 0. Technically, I did DNF 2 books that I'll put here. They were, well, first of all, the male MC was 32. The female MC was 18. And I think in both books that I tried to read, that was it. And I was like, oh, well, that's fine. I think some people like age gaps. But even like without the age gap, the book was also just like really, really poorly written. And I was like, okay, I can't, like, it's one thing to have like a weird age gap, fine. It's another thing to just be really, really, really badly written. So I just kind of dipped out. But yeah, I didn't really count that because I think I only read like a couple of chapters before I was like, bye. Didn't count that in my did not finish. Don't even want to think about it. It's done. But yes, read 4 books, pages, about 2,400. Most of them, as you can see, is in my longest book, Rhythm of War, which quite frankly should count as like 4 books. And my average rating was 3.5. That is why I want to include that last book, because it was good and it was my only 5-star read so far. And 3.5 is not a fantastic start to the year. Like, the crazy thing is that, like, I think all the books I've read have been fine. Like, they weren't, you know, they didn't blow my mind, most of them, but they were like, they were good. You know, that's why I'm like, wow, 3.5. Am I getting harsher in my rating? I don't know. But my monthly average so far, I don't know why monthly average says 4 when average rating says 5 if it's only 1 month. Maybe I need to go back and check the code. But anyways, longest book, like I said, Rhythm of War. Shortest book was the one romance book that I read this month, which was When a Girl Loves an Earl. That book has been on my TBR for so long. I don't even know what made me pick it up. I was craving historical romance. This book is about, maybe we'll get to when we get to the book, but just quickly, it's about a girl that like has a huge crush on this guy. And I know like we all love He Falls First, but I also kind of like to read when she falls first, but then he falls harder. So I read that as well. Going on to my next stats. So like I said, I only read 1 romance book. The other 3 were fantasy books. TBR growth, I added 6 books to my TBR. What was the genre splits? 1 young adult, 2 romance, 2 dark romance, and then 1, I guess, is NA. Technically, all of the books I added to my TBR I checked were all romance. I don't know where that young adult is coming from. I don't know how this is like, but they were all romance books. But yeah, so those are my stats for this month. My TBR growth, I added 6 books, like I said. Last year, I only added 2 books in January. Last year was not good for my TBR growth because I think 2023, when I first started reading again, I was adding everything to my TBR. I think 2024, it kind of like mellowed out. And this year, maybe we're finally getting to an equilibrium because I did not add. In 2023, if I were to put my stats, I mean, I started reading in May of 2023, but if I were to like use August to like compare 2023, 2024, and 2025, you'll see that like August of 2023 was probably like 30 books added. August 2024, no books added. August 2025 might end up being somewhere in the middle. Who knows? But I feel like I've added all the books that I want to add, and I feel like I know what I like enough and I know the people that I trust enough that I don't even need to add a book to my TBR. I'll probably just like go get it or ask. Well, no, we're no longer accepting or asking for PR or bookish mail, but like, you know what I mean? Like when you know what you like, I find that my TBR isn't getting, like my physical TBR is crazy because it's all the books that I know I like and love, but I'm no longer adding it online because it's like I can go to the store and just immediately know what I want to pick up. But yeah, let's get into talking about the books that I read in order. So I read The Last Namsara and also The Bone Season, and I'm gonna mention both because I did this video on Book Talk and Bookstagram where I was like, I'm gonna read the first 5 chapters of a bunch of fantasy books, and I'll put the fantasy books that I did here. It was Daughter of Smoke and Bone, The Last Namsara, Bone Season, and actually the final book that I'm gonna be talking about, the one that I finished reading February 1st, Raven Boys. And I said I'm gonna do that because I want to see if in the first 5 chapters a fantasy book can grip me. And all of these books from the first 5 chapters were basically all 5 stars. I think Daughter of Smoke and Bone was like 4.5, but it was kind of 4.5 where I was like, I feel like it could easily become 5 stars. Oh, unfortunately, Last Name Sarah ended up being like a 3.75. It gave off the same vibe that She Who Is Wrath. That's a romance or romantic book that was released last year. It gave off that same vibe for some reason. Both books started off really, really strong and then just kind of fell flat. The Last Name Sarah is about a girl who lives in a kingdom where they used to be like really close with dragons. It's a romantasy, by the way. They used to be really close to dragons, and then something happens during her grandmother's reign where they're no longer close, and she did something where she wasn't supposed to do with like the dragon. I think like because it was outlawed working with dragons, you're not supposed to actually work with you're not supposed to ever meet with them. You're not supposed to tell the old stories, which is like the dragon stories, but she does when she's really younger, and that causes, I guess, the dragon to react a certain way, I think, and it ends up like putting fire to the entire. Her dad is the dragon king. Her dad is king, and he ends up putting fire to basically the entire kingdom. A lot of people die, so a lot of people hate her, and so she's dedicated her life to basically being the dragon hunter. They call her the Iskari, and so that's what she is. She kills dragons almost to kind of like repent for what she did. She meets a slave when she's trying to like fix a wound that like would. Because then we find out that was back in the day. Towards the current day, we find out that she's actually still telling the stories when she's not supposed to. And she gets wounded, she gets an injury, and she goes to go get it fixed before her dad sees her and her betrothed, who she hates. And she runs into this slave, because they have slaves, because there was an uprising, and then her grandmother's era, like, basically enslaved them. And the slave, you know, speaks to her in a way that's like, oh, aren't you a slave? You're not supposed to talk to me this way. But obviously that is her love interest. And it started off so cute. Like, they met in those first 5 chapters that I read. And I was like, I'm obsessed. I love them. And I don't know what it is about romantasy, y'all. It just always starts out strong for me. What didn't I love about this book? Okay, what did I love? I love the female main character. I thought she was fantastic. I thought the writing was strong. I think I just didn't like. Oh, you know what it was? The world building. When I first started out reading fantasy, I thought I didn't like world building. Hold on, I need to go get my eye cream. My eye cream is castor oil. I swear by it. But I thought I didn't like world building, but world building is actually so important. And it felt like as the world was being built, we're also learning these characters. So certain things, oh my God, I remember now. Certain things in the plot would happen where I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense. I don't think we built up to that point enough for me to fully, like, I buy into it and that it makes sense for the plot, and yes, this is where it should have gone. But I think the author could have done a much better job at actually like explaining the world and building the world. This is those kind of books where one book is a couple. So I think the next book, it still happens in the world. We've met the characters. We've met all the characters, or at least most of the characters for the next 2 books, because it's a trilogy that follows different couples. And I feel like maybe that second book, because we've built up the world somewhat in book 1, book 2 might be more enjoyable. But I just felt like the world could have been built up a lot better, because as we're learning these characters, the world is being built, and you could almost say that the things that were happening were too convenient, but no, they weren't. It's just that the world wasn't built up, so you're kind of trying to marry the two, marry who you're learning these characters to be and the plot happening, and it just felt like there was some kind of disconnect. So yeah, didn't end up loving it as much as I thought. I thought this was going to be like 6 stars. That's what I went on TikTok and Instagram and said, and then it ended up being like a 3.75. I could probably squint and give it like a 4, but we're gonna go with 3.75. Okay, after that I picked up The Bone Season. Like I said, I technically read the first 5 chapters of these books in November during my challenge. Pro tip, put your castor oil on your lashes so they grow. But yeah, technically started reading these books in November when I did my challenge. Bone Season is sci-fi fantasy, and I loved it. I gave this 4.5 stars. I always round down. I know this is maybe controversial because everyone is like, if you give a book 4.5, then like help the author out and make it 5 stars. If a book is 4.75, then I round it up. But if it's 4.5, then I keep it as a 4. But yeah, so this book is sci-fi fantasy. It's in London in the 2050s, maybe 2060s, so like decades into the future. And there are these things called unnaturals, basically people with powers. And the government, Scion is what they call it, blames basically the unnaturals, people with, there's an actual word for them, but then unnaturals is, I think, the slur word, but it's the only one I can remember. And the government blames them for everything. They're always hunting them, this and that. And so the unnaturals have kind of formed this underground kind of like community, mafia basically, where they do work and they have their different teams and their different groups. And we meet Paige. Paige is the FMC. It is first person POV. I should have said last time Sarah is third person, one POV, but third person. Bone season, first person POV, Paige. We meet her. She does work for her boss and everything. She's a very unique unnatural. Like she's a one of a kind. And you find out that these different groups of people, they obviously like to collect unnaturals, but they obviously put more emphasis on collecting unique unnaturals. So Paige's skill is that she can see into other people's dreamscapes. So everyone has a dreamscape, both unnaturals and like normal people that don't have powers. But unnaturals is like actually in color. It's like a full world. It's basically what exists. It's basically like, I think, what powers them and their powers. And so obviously the ones that people that are not unnatural, so like emerotics is what they call them, their dreamscape is like basically just gray because they're not being powered, because they don't actually have, powers. And she can kind of walk into people's dreamscapes. She can affect it in some way. And so she is obviously part of this whole thing. And then when we meet her, she is going home. She is taking the public transport, which is actually very dangerous for people that are unnaturals, because they use other unnaturals to find unnaturals, basically. And if you're caught, then, killed, hung, like, you're done. But she's like, you know what? They very rarely do these like raids. Let me just go. Obviously, that is the day that they decide to do it. She ends up going into the dreamscape of the two police people, the two unnatural police guys. And in doing so, kind of breaks their brain and kills them. Runs home, calls her boss, basically like, holy shit. He's like, you're going to be fine. I'm going to take care of you. She ends up being caught because he does not move fast enough. And what she finds is actually pretty crazy, is that the government isn't killing unnaturals when they find them, unless they do some kind of heinous crime where it has to be public. The government is actually giving them to this enemy maybe, I guess, ally, but not really, to use them to fight these monsters. The enemy is called the Raphaeuses, I don't know, but they're like a creature from a different universe. Not like, they look like humans, but they're bigger, stronger, taller, but they look human. Basically giving it to them to help them fight these monsters, because the humans realize that, oh, we can't fight this on our own, but they can help us. So the Raphaeuses take humans in as like second-class citizens, like treat them like crap, put them through all of these different, basically the Hunger Games. And if you move on to the next level, you keep getting different color shirts, but if you fail, then you get like, I think it's like white, and white basically means coward, you don't get treated well, you kind of live in the slums, and you basically just there for entertainment. It's not good. She has to go through all these trials. She gets picked because someone, a Raphael, I need to figure out how you say that word. When you read a book and you don't actually know how to say the words on the page. It's just like, you see it in your head, but you don't know how to say it out loud. That's me right now. But everyone gets picked. She's the last to get picked. She gets picked by the blood consort, who is the fiance, basically, of the blood heir. The blood heir is this really insane woman who basically wants what Paige has. She wants her skill. She kills people and collects their powers, their skills. Anyways, she gets picked by the blood consort, this guy called Warden. I forget his real name, but they call him the Warden. And he is the fiance of the woman. And yeah, you basically see her grow to learn her powers, how their relationship changes, and her trying to learn how to figure out if she can escape. I already have book 2 downloaded on my Kindle. I haven't started it yet, but I am very excited to start it. I want to give this book kudos to making me like a sci-fi book, because I thought I was done with sci-fi. I loved sci-fi when I was like a teenager, high school, loved it, but I haven't really loved it much since I started reading again. I've more so been in my fantasy. But I really, really enjoyed this book. Can I tell you what I loved the most though? I friggin' loved it. That I actually did not know that there was romance in this book. Like I said in my previous video, I don't read the synopsis of books that I pick up. So I did not know. I just knew this was sci-fi fantasy, and it was set a few decades into the future. So did not know what I was getting myself into. Didn't think there was going to be romance, especially when you're reading the book, like these two characters, the Warden and Paige, hate each other for good reason. Like, I was like, these Raphael, whatever creatures, you gotta go. You're assholes. So did not see that coming. But the way their relationship develops, the last scene between them actually like nearly brought tears to my eyes. I was like, I don't understand how an author, like, I freaking love, that's why enemies to lovers I know people have feelings about it, but for me, I friggin' love when I'm reading a book and I'm like, how is the author going to convince me that they actually want to be together? How is that going to happen? I don't know. How the hell is that going to happen? She did her damn thing. She did her damn thing. Like, I read at the end of the book, I was like, oh, I fully see the respect and love that these two characters have for each other. And it obviously would have grown more. It grows more maybe in the second book, but I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see it coming. What can I say? I did not see that coming. It was beautiful. That last scene, I was like, oh my god, that's so freaking cute. I just love it. Like, you pick up a book and you're like, how the fuck are you gonna convince me that these different species, one species is treated like dirt, is gonna fall in love with her keeper? She's basically a slave. She's not. Like, when you read the book, you understand, but it's like, wow. Okay, then I picked up Rhythm of War. I've done a whole reading vlog about that, so I feel like I don't have to speak too much about my thoughts. I rated this one 4 stars. 4 stars, like I said. It was good in that I love these characters and I would read 100 books with them. But I just felt like it was a couple hundred pages too long. It felt like, even though this was book 4, it fell into the second book syndrome, the middle book syndrome. Book 1 and book 2 were definitely not middle book syndrome. Book 3, I could definitely sense it because I was like, oh, probably could have cut this by a couple hundreds, but whatever, still 5 stars. Book 4, I was like, oh, yeah, it was 4 stars. I'm still really excited for book 5. I am taking kind of a bit of a break before I pick it up, but I think book 4 could have been shorter. I think the character growth that we got for 2 specific characters, actually, 3 characters really. Yeah, 3 characters, Shallan, Kaladin, and Navani, was fantastic. It was needed, but the book felt too long. And I think I would have liked to see growth for certain other characters that we didn't get in this book, and I'm hoping that we get it in the next book. But he really, and by he I mean the author, really focused on these 3 characters. I think it was great, but excited to see what happens next with the others. The Stormlight Archive, for those who don't know, maybe you want to get into Brandon Sanderson. It follows a bunch of different characters, 3rd-person POV, multiple POVs, and they're in this world called Roshar. I actually can't tell you what this book is about. And that's the thing, I made a video that kind of went semi-viral, where I was like, my favorite thing about the Brandon Sanderson fandom is that they will never spoil anything for you. I don't think anyone has actually ever told me what the Stormlight Archive series is about. It's like, I don't even know what Mistborn is about, but everyone talks about it. I don't actually know what to tell you the book is about, but I will just say that you should read it because it will become your next personality. It is high epic fantasy. You get to follow these fantastic 3-dimensional, well-written characters as they learn each other, as they learn themselves, as they learn this world. It's good and you should read it. And I don't have anything else to say. I am not gonna spoil it for you, honey. You are going to read that 1,000-page book and you're gonna thank me for it, okay? What is next? Oh yes, When a Girl Loves an Earl. I think I actually read this like while reading Rhythm of War. Like, I think I maybe needed like something else. Needed a bit of a break, so I picked up When a Girl Loves an Earl. I haven't read the first 4 books in the series. I just, like I said, I wanted a book where it was like she falls first. She basically like hears about this guy and she's like, I'm obsessed. I want him. She basically hears about this guy from her friend that I think he kind of saves her friend from people bullying her. And she's like, I want him, and I want him yesterday. She gets to see him at these, like, I guess the functions that they have in London during the season, the events, the balls. And she's basically trying to wear him down. That is basically what 85% of this book is. Maybe 80%. It's like her wearing him down and him being like, no. We meet him at the beginning of the book, and we get to see where he comes from. He's from Scotland, and I almost DNF'd. Am I gonna get cancelled if I admit why I almost DNF'd this book? Listen, I love my Scottish brothers and sisters, but reading the words on the page in that accent, I was like, it was too much. I was like, oh, if this is how he talks throughout the whole book, because I knew it was going to be double POV, I'm not picking up this book. So I actually ended up skipping to his next chapter because it was like him at 16 and then I think a 10-12 year gap. I was like, oh, thank God he speaks like an English person. That one I can do. Guys, I'm so sorry. Please don't cancel me, but I couldn't do it. But anyways, so we meet him. He's in Scotland. Then they tell him that, oh, you're kind of the next in line because the previous person didn't have any heirs. And he's very far removed. So he's like, huh? Like, that's, like, what? He's in love with this girl. Obviously, has to then leave her. When he comes back, things happen and he's heartbroken. And he decides to never, ever have kids. And to never get married, basically. So her efforts, as beautiful as she is, because she is very beautiful, that's how they describe her. He's like, it ain't ever gonna happen, honey. But she's wearing him down, and even how they end up getting married is really funny. I think I rated this book like 3.5. Like it was a fun, nice palate cleanser. I don't think I fell in love with the couple as much as I thought I would. That's why I got 3.5. But the writing was really good, and like I said, I was craving a She Falls First kind of book. I liked how insane kind of the FMC was, and she was just very honest about her feelings and just, you know, like just actually being a menace to him. She was like, I want you. And he was like, no. And she's like, I actually don't understand what you're saying. Like, I don't know English anymore. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, 3.5. I liked it for what it was. Nice cleanser. Then I went back to Rhythm of War. And then I continued reading Raven Boys. Like I said, I read the first 5 chapters in November for my challenge on TikTok. And continued reading it again. Gave this one 5 stars. This is the one that I finished reading in February, so it's not really part of my January reading wrap-up, but it is what it is. I love this book so much. I love this book so freaking much. So much. So much. An unhealthy amount. It's actually like 5 stars. It is 5 stars. It's fantasy, urban fantasy, more fantastical fantasy realism almost. Not in your face fantasy. Like, you're not seeing vampires and werewolves and fairies. It is in modern day, but not this modern day. I think I would actually say like this is early 2000s, maybe the 90s. They have cell phones, but they don't have laptops. It doesn't seem like. I don't think this is not in the TikTok era. I mean, this book wasn't even released. I think it was released early 2010s, and I think maybe the book was based early 2000s, is what I would guess. And we follow these 4 boys as they are basically trying to find Glendower. And the way that I would describe that whole thing is like if someone was trying to find Arthur, if they were trying to find, like, if they were really into the Arthurian legend and wanted to find Arthur and his table of like knights or whatever. So that's kind of how Glendower is, except he was someone who fought in the England versus Welsh war. Obviously Welsh is not part of the UK, so lost, but then he ran away or he disappeared and they haven't seen him since. But the theory, you know, the lore, conspiracy theory, if you will, is that he didn't die and he went somewhere and he's still alive, and whoever wakes him up gets a wish of whatever it is they want. And so you follow these 4 young guys as they're basically trying to find it. There's obviously very much a ringleader called Gansey. But then we also have this our FMC who is from a family of psychics, but she's the only one that's not psychic. Her name is Blue. It is multi-POV, 3rd person. And yeah, you follow them on this journey of trying to find this whole thing. One thing I thought was really interesting, and it kind of threw me off, was how this book is airy. You're following, like, Blue is 16, I think the guys are maybe 17. So they're quite young. It's very airy, gothic type, that kind of fantasy that exists in the real, like, if fantasy existed in the real world, it's how you would think it would be. Basically Halloween 24/7. But yet the characters were kind of quirky. And I say quirky because they didn't react to the whole fantasy stuff. Like, we meet them, and by them I mean the boys, when they're already kind of neck deep into looking for this whole thing. Like, they have their whole theories, and they're talking about it. Oh, there's something in my eye. That's the downside about growing your lashes, is that when it's as thick as mine, it gets into everywhere. Holy crap. Yeah, when we meet them, they're already kind of neck deep looking for this. So when they talk about it, they talk about it so normally. And I was like, because the one person that really wants to find this person, Glendower, is Gansey. You find out later in the book why it means so much to him. But I was like, why are the other 3 boys just going along with this? Like, if I had a friend, because I did go to boarding school, if I had a friend that was like, I'm looking for this, like, let's do this, I'd be like, girl, I'm going to go to the library and study. You do you, though. But they were all just like so into it and like so like, oh yeah, this is perfectly normal. And that's why I call it quirky, because I was like, I feel like that's not normal. but they were all so into it, and it was like so real to them, and it was real, obviously, like that's what the whole book is based off of. But I just thought that was so interesting. I was like, this is so weird. Like, no one is anyone going to call out how weird this is? Like, are any of the other three boys, especially one of them that's not even like rich, because the four boys are in this school called Agliboni, but they're basically from this, like, all from rich families, very, very, very wealthy, expensive boarding school. Blue is, you know, not wealthy, and she has this idea of who these boys are that go to this specific school because they're, you know, driving their sports cars and they're so young, but they have all this money and everything. And she comes from a not very rich home life, but a very good home life. She's very close with her moms and her aunts or whatever. But yeah, like I was saying, so these boys have all the money in the world looking for this guy, but then there's one boy in the group, Adam, that isn't rich. He works multiple jobs to be able to put himself through the school. He has partial scholarships, so he has to work for the rest, always studying, comes from a very, like, not great home life. And I'm like, how did Ganzi convince you to do this? Like, I feel like you have bigger fish to fry than to be driving all over the place, you know, looking for this guy. But it's not, nothing is trivialized. The search for Glendower isn't trivialized. What this guy is going through and trying to put himself, because he's also one of the POVs that you get to see, it is also not trivialized. Your heart really goes out to him. I just thought it was so interesting that, like, no, and that, I think that's the world that the author built, where, I mean, you have one character, Blue, who comes from a family of psychics. These guys have been looking, Ganzi has been looking for Glendower for years. The other ones for maybe, they've known each other for about 18 months, because Ganzi moves schools based on where he thinks Glendower is. Like, that is how rich he is. He's like, Dad, I want to go to this new boarding school. He's been in this one for, I think, the longest. Loves his friends, like found family type vibes, because he thinks that he's finally hit the jackpot. This is where Glendower is going to be, but also loves his friends, will take them anywhere. He is also the ringleader. But yeah, I just thought that was so unique, how the author kind of, you're learning this, but you're also like, this is not normal, but then the characters are making it seem like it's normal. And I was like, wow, it's a bit of a trip, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, loved it. It's one of my favorite things was the found family between the boys. It wasn't really found family, because I think my understanding of found family is that you're reading the book and they find each other. But I think in this book, they like I said, they'd already known each other. Ganzi had been in the school for about 18 months, and he kind of came and then brought these three boys together, and like now they're like, and when we meet them, it's 18 months and they're very, very close. They can read each other's minds, basically. Like, they're just, you know. I accidentally saw a review online where someone was like, the relationship kind of gave up homoerotic vibes, and I was like, I can see why you're saying that, because it's very airy type vampire-ish feel, like, vibe of the book. And then the boys are very, very close, have a very intimately close relationship, not like platonic, but they just know each other so well and they accept each other and everything. But the only word that I would use to describe the relationship is siblinghood. And I made a TikTok about this already, made a Bookstagram video, reel. Siblinghood is interesting because you don't get to just choose to accept them as who they are now, who they were in the future, who they'll be who they were in the past, who they'll be in the future. Siblinghood means that you have no choice but to follow and love this person, in my case 6 people, through every stage of their lives. Who my sister was at 16 isn't who she is now at, you know, whatever age. If she's who she is at 21 isn't going to be who she is at 31. And me as a sibling loves them for whomever they are at 21, whomever they will be at 31, and vice versa. And that is such a unique thing, because relationships end, you know, platonic marriages, divorces, girlfriend, boyfriend, like, they end, and people will say we became different people. You have no choice in siblinghood but to accept each other as you become different people, like, in spite of becoming different people. And it's a beautiful thing. Like, I love my siblings, and that's what I would describe these boys as. It's not that they accept each other for who they are, because you see in reading the book that they butt heads, don't like what the other is doing, don't like how the other acts, but they love them in spite of that, maybe even because of that. They accept them and they want them to be better, or not even better. Maybe that's just who they are, and that's, you know, that's what you have to deal with. And yeah, I just thought that was a very, very beautiful thing to read, and to see that among boys. I know a lot of people don't like the multiple boys, one girl. I actually completely forgot that was a thing in the early 2000s, 2010s. That was such a big thing in fantasy books. In most books, it was always like multiple boys and then one girl. But I think the author did it really, really well. I love Blue. She holds her own. And yeah, I also already have the sequel downloaded on my Kindle. I'm going to be reading that like in the coming weeks. I really, really liked that book, and I can't wait to read the next one. I'm excited because the next one follows a character that he was a main character in the first book, but I felt like he was just barely a main character. Like I was like, there's more here. And so when I read the synopsis of book 2, because I only read synopsis like of the sequels once I read the first book, which I never know what the first book is about. So I didn't know what this book was about. I just knew that it was about boys, or the main characters were going to be boys. So I started the second book. I've read the synopsis of that one, and I was like, okay, it follows that character. Very, very excited. So what am I reading now? Like I said, I am reading the sequel to The Raven Boys. I forget what it's called. I'll put it up here. And I'm also reading the sequel to The Bone Season. Fun fact, I thrifted both The Bone Season book 1 and book 2 when I was in Canada, like maybe a year-ish ago, just under a year ago. And then I found out that the author re-released the book. So right now I'm reading the old book. Maybe I'll read the new books. But ooh, I forgot to say that the reason why The Bone Season got 4.5 instead of 5 was because I felt like the world building could have been better. There were times when, like, even as I'm reading the book, I'm like sometimes forgetting who these characters are and like who's what or what this place is, and I felt like maybe that's what she improves on when she, like, in her re-release, like, because that's something that I think could have very much like improved my enjoyment while reading the book, would have been if world building was a little bit tighter. It was there, but it's like there's a way to almost remind people, your readers, of what they're reading, because there was just a lot to keep track of. What else am I reading? Captive Prince on my bed. I don't really feel like walking over there to get it. My sister is very happy. If you watch my other booktube videos, you know the story behind this one. She's extremely happy that I'm finally picking up this book and not Cruel Prince, which is what I accidentally bought and read in 2023 when she recommended this book to me. But I'm finally on Captive Prince. I am traveling in about 6 days, so I'm hoping to get through. Captive Prince it's not very thick. It's only about 300-ish pages, so I should be able to get it done before I travel. And then when I travel, what books am I going to take with me? I have no idea. I'm thinking the Yasad Air or the Jasad Air. I actually don't know how to say that. In my head, it's Yasad, the J silent. I don't know. I'm thinking that other book by Daniel L. Jensen. Maybe I'll finally read Stormlight Archive while I'm away. I think I'm only going to, since I'm only gone for 4 weeks, and in 4 weeks I tend to read like 4 to 5 books. That's my average. I have 2 books on my Kindle. I'll take the Yasad Air. I have Stormlight Archive, book 5, which is going to be thick. Maybe that's a 1 already. And I also want to read one that's going to be set in our world. Ooh, Will of the Many or Blood over Brighthaven. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. I have no idea what my next video is going to be. Maybe a reading vlog of all the books that I read while I'm away. I'm going to Nigeria, by the way. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.